The Stupidest Waste of Money Part 4. My wife decided to start a mini chicken farm for $5,500, but changed her mind after a month. My wife was reading a blog about urban farming and was inspired to have chickens right in our backyard. She bought all the equipment needed, a coop, feeders, even a heater for cold nights. It all cost us $5,500. The chickens arrived and all was well, until one night, something climbed through the fence and scared them so much that they stopped laying. My wife quickly lost interest, and I was left caring for these ridiculous birds. We ended up giving the chickens away to neighbors, and the coop sits as a monument to stupidity. $1,500 for a smart toilet that everyone is bored with. When I was on a business trip to Japan, I was blown away by the smart toilets that were there with heated seats and automatic features. I decided we had to have one at home, so I bought one for $1,500. Everyone loved it for the first week, but then it turned out that the automatic seat lift was annoying, the heating was too hot, and the bidet feature wasn't to everyone's taste. Now it's just a fancy toilet that doesn't do anything worth the money. $7,000 on spearfishing gear, even though we live in Colorado. My coworker was a huge fishing fan and convinced me that spearfishing was a whole other level and we should try it. I bought all the gear for $7,000, including a wetsuit and an underwater spear gun. The problem is that we live in Colorado and the closest suitable body of water is a few hours away. We went there exactly once. I spent half an hour in the freezing water, didn't catch anything, and almost caught a cold. Since then, the gear has just been hanging in the garage, and I'll probably never go there again. $2,400 for an online Japanese course, so I could order at a sushi place. I decided it would be a great idea to learn Japanese, if only so I could order at my local sushi place and impress the waiter. I bought an online course for $2,400 and started studying hard. After a few months, I finally felt ready and headed to the restaurant. I gathered up all my courage, walked up to the waiter, and asked him my order in Japanese. He froze for a moment, then smiled and asked, "Do you mean the regular roll?" in perfect English. Since then, I have never tried to speak Japanese in restaurants again. But now I can greet my cat with the Japanese word konnichiwa, and at least that makes him happy. For $1,800 for a plastic greenhouse that nothing grows in, my mom decided to start a small garden and bought an expensive plastic greenhouse to grow vegetables year-round. We spent $4,800 on installation, but it turned out to be too hot in the summer and too cold in the winter. Mom quickly lost interest, and the greenhouse became abandoned. Now it's just an empty space in the yard with old pots and dirty gloves lying around, and my mom buys her vegetables from the store like everyone else. $6,500 for a pool table that turns into a dining table. When we moved into our new house, I decided to fulfill my lifelong dream of buying a pool table. I spent $6,500, installed it in the basement, and at first, I had weekly games with friends. But then everyone got tired of it, and the kids were having trouble playing with the space. I ended up buying a special tabletop, and now it serves as a large dining table for family dinners when we have company. The pool balls are gathering dust in a box, and the keys are nothing more than an old memory. $4,500 to repair an antique clock that isn't used anyway. This antique grandfather clock belonged to my grandfather, and after he passed away, I decided to have it repaired to preserve a piece of family history. I took it to a clockmaker, and the repair cost me $4,500. After the repair, the clock looked great and ticked like it had just come out of the winding machine. But it soon became clear that it needed regular maintenance and adjustments, which I just wasn't prepared to do every month. Plus, the loud chime of the clock every night was starting to irritate everyone in the house, especially the kids. Now it just sits in the corner of the living room, unwound like an expensive and slightly odd piece of furniture. $2,000 on stock investing courses that only resulted in losses. At one point, I was sure that I had to learn how to invest to increase our savings. I bought the Successful Investor course for $2,000, which explained the basics of stock trading. The problem is that I realized that the stock market is a very risky and complex area that requires much more time than I expected. When I tried to make my first investments, I lost another $1,500 in just a couple of months. After that, I abandoned the idea. As a result, the courses are still sitting on my computer, and I decided that it is easier to entrust the money to professionals than to try to figure out such a nerve-wracking area on my own. $3,300 on a boat-turned bar that doesn't fit in the house. My neighbor decided to give us a unique party bar. an old boat converted into a bar with shelves and bottle holders. We thought it would be a feature of our house, but it turns out the boat doesn't fit through the doorway at all. We spent $3,300 rebuilding the boat, and then another $3,300 renting lifting equipment to try to move it across the deck. In the end, it stayed in the garden, where it simply serves as an outdoor decoration. Everyone thinks it's so cute, but no one knows how much this stupid thing actually cost. $8,000 on an old bus to convert into a camper, but it's just rusting. My brother and I decided to buy an old bus and convert it into a camper so we could travel with our family. We found an old school bus for $8,000 and thought it would be the perfect weekend project. In reality, the bus was rusty, needed a complete engine overhaul, and we needed to rewire it. We gave up after a couple months when we realized it would cost 3 times as much to convert the bus as we thought it would. Now the bus sits in our backyard and looks like a prop for a movie about a forgotten America. $2,500 for a gold prospecting kit used once. Inspired by a TV show, I bought a $2,500 gold prospecting kit to hunt for gold in the mountains. My son and I headed out for the weekend, excited to strike it rich and find some gold. All we found was an old beer can, which my son mistook for an artifact, and I didn't try to dissuade him. After that, the kit sat in the garage, and we decided that the life of a gold miner was clearly not for us. $5,500 to rent a professional photo studio for a blogger who changed her mind. My sister decided to become a famous food blogger and asked me to help her rent a professional photo studio to shoot cooking videos. I paid for the rent for a month, investing $5,500. We brought all the equipment and started preparing dishes for the shoot. But after just a week, my sister said it was all too complicated and time-consuming. The dishes didn't look as beautiful as she dreamed, and the lighting and framing were just stressful. Now the studio is empty, and my sister has gone back to writing recipes without photos. It was an expensive lesson in how a good camera isn't the most important thing in blogging. $5,800 on a bike to commute to work, but my job moved across town. I always wanted to be the kind of person who bikes to work, staying healthy and reducing my ecological footprint. I bought a cool electric bike with hydraulic brakes, a comfortable frame, and super LED lights for $5,800. For 6 months, I enjoyed the rides and was even proud that, unlike my colleagues, I avoided traffic jams. But 6 months later, our office was moved to the other side of town, where the roads became too dangerous and time-consuming to get to even on an electric bike. Now it sits in the hallway and serves as a reminder of my ambitious plans to be green. Every time I get out the car, the bike looks at me reproachfully with its lights. $9,000 for a decorative waterfall that now sounds like a constant leak. I dreamed of relaxing evenings listening to the sound of running water, so I decided to install a decorative waterfall in my yard. We invested $9,000 in the project. We hired landscapers, bought pumps, and beautiful rocks. When it was finished, the waterfall looked beautiful, a real piece of nature right in our home. But after a couple of weeks, the sound of the water began to irritate us all, especially at night, when it sounded like a constant leak. Now the waterfall is turned off because neighbors complained about the noise, and the kids started joking that it sounded like a toilet that someone forgot to turn off. The waterfall began to resemble more of a decorative pile of rocks. $8,500 for a flamingo collection for the yard that got the neighbors upset. I wanted to add some color to my yard and ordered a collection of decorative flamingos for $8,500. These weren't just any pink plastic birds, actual art objects, different sizes, poses, and even a few metal flamingos with colorful feathers. It looked really cool at first, but soon the neighbors started complaining. Too bright, distracting, the kids are scared. My neighbor, who has poor eyesight, even mentioned that the flamingos remind him of zombies when it's dark outside. To avoid further harm, I removed most of the flamingos. Only a few remained, and now they sit tucked away in the far corner of the yard, as if in exile. $2,600 for street dance classes held on Zoom. My daughter had long dreamed of learning street dance, so I decided to surprise her by buying a master class from a famous choreographer for $2,600. The problem was that the pandemic started, and all the classes were suddenly transferred to Zoom. Dancing in the kitchen, trying not to hit the furniture and not slip on the tiles, was not at all what she imagined. All the dreams of a large hall and outdoor rehearsals turned out to be just a series of weird training sessions in front of a laptop. In the end, she gave up on it and I was never able to get my money back for the classes, which completely did not live up to expectations. $7,800 to install solar panels that were never connected to the house. I have always been an eco-conscious person and decided that solar panels were a great way to save on electricity and reduce our ecological footprint. I spent $7,800 to install the panels, choosing the most modern model. But when it came to connecting them to the house's electrical grid, it turned out that we had not taken into account the complexities of local regulations. It turned out that we needed to get several more permits and upgrade our electrical panel. In the end, the panels were left hanging, and connecting to the grid never happened, too complicated and expensive. The panels are now just pretty decorations on the roof that remind us of our good intentions and the complexities of bureaucracy. $3,900 for a cactus collection that was eaten by field mice. I've always loved plants, but I wasn't a big fan of taking care of them. So I decided that a cactus collection was the perfect solution. It doesn't require much water and looks very unique. I ordered $3,900 worth of rare cacti, different shapes, colors, spines. But I underestimated one thing: field mice. They came to us from the surrounding fields and began methodically gnawing at the cacti, despite their spines. As a result, half the plants died and the rest began to get sick. Now, in the place of my collection, there is a lone cactus that miraculously survived, and I myself no longer dare to do gardening. $1,800 for a surprise gift for my wife, who is allergic to orchids. For our anniversary, I decided to give my wife a special gift and bought her an exclusive collection of orchids, specially grown in a greenhouse, for $1,800. I was sure it would be the perfect gift because she loves flowers. But to my horror, the next day, she started showing signs of an allergy. She sneezed, her eyes turned red, and then a rash appeared on her skin. We called the doctor, and he confirmed that it was a reaction to the orchids. In the end, we had to give the orchids to a neighbor who turned out to be more resistant to them, and my wife got antihistamines instead of a romantic evening. $3,800 to rent a convertible for my son's graduation party that was stuck in the rain. I wanted my son to feel like the star of his prom, so I rented him a $3,800 Mustang convertible to show up to the party in. But on graduation day, it suddenly started raining heavily and lasted all evening. My son decided not to open the top to protect his suit, so the convertible ended up being a regular car. None of his friends even noticed it was a convertible, and my son was so upset about the weather that he said he'd take a cab next time. The convertible sat in the parking lot all evening, and all our hopes for a spectacular arrival were dashed in the downpour. $2,000 on the best metal playhouse that attracted lightning. I bought my kids a $2,000 metal playhouse so they could play outside like real explorers. It was sturdy, roomy, had small windows, and even a table inside. But once the first summer thunderstorms hit, it turned out that the metal playhouse was a real lightning target. One night, during a thunderstorm, lightning struck so close that sparks flew across the surface of the playhouse, and the kids have been afraid to go near it ever since. Now the playhouse sits out of sight, like a little abandoned cabin, reminding us that sometimes it's worth thinking about safety before buying. $5,500 for a cruise for parents who chose to stay in their room. I bought my parents a $5,500 Caribbean cruise so they could relax and enjoy the views. I pictured them strolling the deck, enjoying the sunsets, and dining in a restaurant with live music. But when they came back, they spent almost the entire cruise in their room because Mom got seasick and Dad didn't want to leave her alone. Now, every time we discuss their romantic getaway, Dad laughs and says they should have stayed home. It would have been more comfortable and definitely less seasick.